Welcome back to the autumn of 1975. A war has ended, but America still seems to be at war with itself. For some, the answer is violence, kidnap an heiress, rob a bank, shoot the president. For others, the answer is to meditate on it all. Some choose to dance the night away, letting the hypnotic beat and fractured light of the disco block the sights and sounds of our inner struggles. Suddenly, there is a diversion, a movie about a fish.
Human beings very rarely get bitten by sharks, and they almost never die from the bite. But in the fall of '75, millions of Americans wallowed in a kind of delicious, vicarious fear of sharks. And they bought Jaws souvenirs and gewgaws. That movie grossed $124 million in 80 days, a record for the time. From the absolute safety of a movie house, we watched three puny men struggling with a plastic shark and were scared witless.
Never. You're not born here. You're not an island.
Well, it was a long, arduous shoot. But if you're going to get stuck, it's nice to get stuck on Martha's Vineyard Island.
Playing the local police chief, Roy Scheider.
The problem was that the special effects people didn't anticipate how much industrial strength salt water would do to their equipment. It corroded pipes and electronic equipment. So we shot almost half the movie without the shark even working.
The fear caused by this movie was staggering.
Everyone has an innate fear of water, whether it's a washing bowl, a sink, a pond, anything. I always consider my performance in Jaws a comic performance. And if you really study it, you'll see how it's built around this inept guy with terrible anxieties about everything.
Can't get down to the office, and that garbage truck next to the office has got to be.
He is every man in that picture. And he's the last guy you ever imagine is going to kill that shark. I knew it was a phony shark. But I'll tell you, like everyone else, after the film was over, I don't go swimming this day without looking around a lot more than I used to.
In the last couple of weeks, I've kind of been uneasy and keep turning around and looking to see what's behind me as well as in front.
By Labor Day weekend, Jaws mania was out of hand. T-shirts, even bikinis sported great white sharks. There were even commercial bites in the commercial breaks.
In the dull and commonplace occurrences of day-to-day living, one thing...
While a mechanical shark was selling bikinis and beer, the most famous man in the world, Muhammad Ali, was selling himself. He was the most graceful heavyweight since James J. Corbett, and the biggest mouth since John L. Sullivan.
Is it over yet? Y'all got my damn check?
Joe Frazier sells thief this all night.
It was a
Rough, tough Joe Frazier fought a whole lot better than he sang.
first round knockout, and he was out until the count of 10.
It would be the most widely reported battle in the Philippines since World War II. Ali versus Frazier for the third time.
My poem goes like this. It will be a killer and a chiller and a thriller when I get the gorilla in Manila.
It had to be a thriller with the drama, being in a new country, being in a different place.
Angelo Dundee was Ali's manager.
I mean, heck, you realize the era we went through where we were televising back into the States from England, We're all over the place, Scotland, Manila, Kuala Lumpur. Muhammad created that.
For once, the product matched the hype. The hype produced 25,000 eyewitnesses and some 700 million TV and closed-circuit viewers in more than 60 countries. What they would see was two great champions struggling toward glory.
What do you think of the fight? Well, I think
Don Dunphy was at ringside.
Anybody who climbs into the ring has a certain amount of courage, but some have more courage than others. I don't think anybody had more courage than Ali and Joe Frazier.
The challenger and former heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Frazier. From Louisville, Kentucky, USA, the heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali.
He gonna see a new Joe Frazier.
Like an astronaut, when the last 10-second countdown comes and the rockets blast off, I'll be in orbit. You don't back up, you don't throw a left jab, you don't duck, you just take punches and keep coming and try to block him. He's a robot.
It got tougher. It didn't get easier. It was the survival of the fittest.
There's the corner of Ali as he leads the cheering. Ali leading his own cheering.
Frazier's manager was Eddie Futch.
We had a fight plan where Frazier was to remain in his crouch, bobbing and weaving, stay low, and back Ali into the ropes and use a body attack, and it was very effective.
I was surprised Joe had so much stamina. I was surprised as in shape he was. And if I didn't have the condition, I know I would have lost. It was too much pressure.
Angelo, he prevailed upon Ali to come out for the 11th. I don't think he would have if Angelo hadn't been there. So about midway of the 11th round, Frazier's left eye started to puff. Frazier never cut in all the years I was with him until the very last fight of his career.
You know, in the 11th round, Muhammad came back to the corner. I figured the ball game was over because he was doing a Leon and Errol coming back to the corner. Looked like everything was out of him. Ice on his back, rub him up, get his arms going. And, well, I said, well, we're going to separate the men from the boys now, Muhammad, because that was the 11th round. Was a tough, tough round. And I don't know where the guy would take it out from. He had that inner something where he suck it up.
The 13th round, he had Joe with a right hand that knocked his mouthpiece 6 rows back into the audience. The eye became a slit.
13 grueling rounds. This was a battle of attrition, and they're coming up to the 14th, and they must wonder if it will ever end. Neither one of them had taken punishment like that before, or ever would again.
Now the eye is almost completely shut. You can't see those punches at all. He has to stand up and back out, which was right in Ali's range, instead of being down low and in close. Now he was at Ali's mercy, and he was throwing those hard right hands Frazier didn't even see coming. If you don't see the punches coming, you can't block them or duck them or slip them. He was taking those shots so solidly. That's it now. This is the 14th round of a hard fight, and your resistance is, is getting lower and lower anyhow. I made the definite decision. In the last minute of the 14th round, I says, this fight is over. It's over, Joe.
Well, this was not easy for Eddie Futch, believe me, because not only was he the manager-trainer of Joe Frazier, he was also a good friend. He was like his father. Now, Futch was unusual. Here we have millions at stake. He could have allowed that man to come out in the 15th round and perhaps pull the fight out with one desperation punch, because he still could punch.
I couldn't see letting him take a chance on being hurt seriously or permanently or killed.
Joe Frazier made $2 million in gallant defeat. Ali, the winner and still champion, made $4.5 million. Easy money.
Ali was a millionaire and a hero. But if he lived in Boston or Louisville, his children in that same autumn would have been caught in a violence that had nothing to do with sport. Come back to the fall of 1975, to the inner city struggle against racism.
There's another kind of Ford Tempo, specializing in sheer exuberance. Ford Tempo Sport GL. Its high output engine and road handling suspension tell you it wants to be driven. Ford Tempo Sport GL. Think of it as fun in a distinctively different form. Ford Tempo Sport GL.
Have you driven a Ford lately?
How about a pizza roll snack from Gino's?
Oh, I can't remember the last time I had these.
What's the matter, you? Hey, what do you gotta say?
Hey, don't you miss that taste?
What you mama gonna say?
Eat your Gino's pizza roll. It's a nice hot snack.
When's the last time you had a pizza roll snack?
What's the matter, you? Hey, what do you gotta say? Hey,
You know how good the Gino's are, so what's the matter, you?
hey!
Winning's easy. Just give 110%. Speed Stick deodorant gives 110%. Why? It has no alcohol to evaporate. Its protection lasts all day. Glides on dry in just a few strokes. That's 110% protection.
Speed Stick deodorant, the wide stick.
That's your edge.
Fine Menon.
Shaving's rough on sensitive skin, but aftershave skin conditioner soothes.
Sensible care for sensitive skin. AFTA.
Fine Menon.
On the Disney Sunday movie.
I'm not doing anything.
Everyone's favorite bug is back.
Something's weird about that card.
Herbie's cruising south of the border and facing trouble head on.
I can't believe this.
Harvey Korman and Cloris Leachman better buckle up when Herbie goes bananas.
Sunday.
Boston was the scene of two struggles in the fall of '75, one major league. In what was probably the best played, most exciting World Series and some of the Yankee-Dodgers clashes of the 50s, Boston and Cincinnati went at it for 6 games. Then Carlton Fisk's home run in Fenway Park forced Boston into a 7th game, which it lost. Boston got forced more than once that fall.
Busing to desegregate the public schools had begun in Boston the year before. It was bitterly opposed by most whites and unpopular with many blacks. There were ugly incidents, and nearly 1/4 of the students did not attend school all year. Now, in September of '75, the predominantly white sections of Charlestown and South Boston are gearing up for massive resistance. 600 National Guardsmen and 1,600 state troopers and local police are on duty to oversee the transfer of 26,000 students.
Most of the buses appear to be about half empty. They're accompanied by police on motorcycles. There is just a massive police presence here outside the school. State troopers lining the way. They're wearing helmets. Bettina Gregory, ABC News in South Boston.
Police trying to hold him back. You got bricks coming at your bus. That was just like a nightmare.
Willie Wilkerson was a junior at South Boston High School that September.
The images was like, nigga go home holding up signs and different things. Getting inside the school, it's like going to a prison that you have to, be searched, have to go through metal detector. If it goes off, trying to get to school is like going through an obstacle course.
Anti-busing groups had worked for a year building momentum for their side, and so despite a massive presence of police in riot gear, South Boston broke out in violence on September 8th.
Louise Day Hicks had become a household name. She was president of ROAR, an acronym for Restore Our Alienated Rights. And she was a driving force in the anti-busing movement.
A very sad day. A sad day for the children of Boston, but a sad day for Boston.
It was the women, the mothers in Boston, who were the most relentless in their opposition to busing.
I ask you to look around. Please, is this freedom? No!
Pat Russell was president of Charlestown's branch of ROAR. They called themselves the Powder Keg.
But they were more afraid of the women in Charlestown than they were of the men anywhere else in that city. Because the day they asked us where we got our name, Powder Keg. I said, because we're a time bomb ready to explode, and you people are lighting the fuse.
Consider the irony of the mothers' anti-busing prayer vigil.
And during World War II, the mothers marched in prayer for the boys. So I said, well, we'll march as mothers, only mothers, in our prayer march. We got as far as High Street after we went by a school.
Tell us one thing down here and you another thing.
Oh, my God, there was the TPF and the motorcycles and the MDC police again. They stopped us. We did get through the line. All didn't, but we did break that line, and that's what the goal was.
Asian, Latin, black, and white. Our schools, we must unite.
The other side was equally adamant that Boston schools would integrate and bus if that's what it took. Thomas Atkins was president of the NAACP in Boston.
They continued to be misinformed by people they trusted. Because if we keep yelling at the bus, if we keep throwing rocks at these buses and pulling our kids out of the school, people will give up and this desegregation thing will go away. Never did.
By the second week of school, there was less violence, and so by mid-September, most of the National Guard went home. The police stayed. The violence may have surprised most of the nation, but in Boston, they knew what an inner struggle the city had had over racism, and the struggle wasn't over.
No other city in this country faced what Boston faced. None. Not even Little Rock in 1957 faced the kind of violence, large-scale, continuous, long-running, systematic, well-planned, and implemented violence that Boston faced. Nowhere else.
Boston knew it was going to have trouble, prepared for it, and got it. Louisville, Kentucky was more hopeful. Opponents of busing there were loud and emotional, but they were not expected to be violent.
How y'all doing?
Harvey Sloan was the mayor of Louisville.
The court order was 6 weeks prior to the opening of school. And as a community, we really did not have the time to prepare for it. However, we didn't really feel it was going to be that much of an outburst. People were really angry. Parents were angry.
On September 3rd, the concerned parents of Louisville called for a boycott.
United will never be defeated.
Dottie Pretty was a leader of the protest.
I don't think anyone had any notion at all of fighting, burning buses, or doing some of the things that we heard Boston was doing, because we knew that other people had been doing it. We knew that Boston had been doing it. We knew they had had some problems in some other cities, but we didn't see ourselves doing that at the time.
On Friday, September 5th, peaceful protest turned into pitched battle.
We are in a war, and we're going to win this one.
Whenever I arrived, there was already 2,000 or 3,000 people there, and I saw the potential for great problems.
Jefferson County Police Chief Russell McDaniel.
There was at least 2 or 3 occasions where we were totally out of control in terms of controlling the crowd and the violence that was going on there.
Jefferson County Police Chief Russell McDaniel termed the situation at Valley High School out of hand. The chief then
They turned a vehicle over in Dixie Highway and set it on fire while the crowd turned to violence. They injured a 11-year-old child We had 6 officers on the ground at one time, and we couldn't get medical help for them. Nobody could get in or nobody could get out.
Officer Michael Doughty lost an eye.
I believe a lot of officers had problems understanding why we were the object of the attack.
The fury and the savagery of the unexpected violence stunned even the police.
The police officers were struggling, so one of them came to me with tears streaming down his cheeks, and he had seen his aunt and uncle and a group of protesters that was throwing objects at him. He was in riot gear. They probably didn't recognize him, but he recognized his aunt and uncle, and he said it's reached that point.
A federal judge banned further demonstrations. The order was ignored. 100 people were injured, more than 400 arrested. 1,000 National Guardsmen were called in, and state troopers were assigned to ride the buses. Rodney Swain was a junior in high school.
And one time I remember coming home and we thought we saw some people with guns aiming at the bus driver and everybody ducked. And if that's not a fright for a youngster, you know.
Inside the schools, no violence, lots of tension.
We would never walk the halls in singles. We would try to walk the halls in 2s or 3s because we had to protect ourselves. And that's the only way that we felt comfortable.
Louisville had shocked itself. The violence ebbed quickly. The ban on demonstrations was observed. By September 17th, the National Guard was gone and the schools went back to work. The brand new principal at Southern High School was James Birch.
I realized that my job was on the line, that I had to make this work. It didn't make any difference what my personal feelings were. I had a professional responsibility.
So, busing was established, and the tentative coming together of the children began. Ann Shively was a 4th grader.
At first, we did kind of stay to ourselves because we didn't know. We weren't used to being around, you know, white children. They weren't used to being around us. So we sat at our own table, and they sat at their own table. And we interacted with each other, and they did the same until eventually we just slowly started to come together.
To come together slowly takes patience, but sometimes tomorrow is the only thing that will put an end to today's struggles. And sometimes not even tomorrow is enough. Come back to the autumn of 1975, to the outward legacy of the inner struggle.
Our World continues in a moment.
Who says a guy and his family have to drive a family car they don't like? Not Nissan Stanza. Like who says you can't have road sedan room and still afford braces? Happy, guys?
Happy.
There. Who says you can't have road sedan style and comfort and a great shape? Happy, honey?
Happy.
Who says you can't have all the luxuries, all the amenities, and still have enough for the finer things? Happy with your Stanza, Fred?
Happy.
The quality and value of Stanza. The name is Nissan.
You're telling me Trident helps fight cavities? It always has?
That's right. Chewing Trident after sugary snacks reduces the acids on your teeth that can cause cavities.
Something that's delicious and good for you, I love it.
Trident, good to chew and fights cavities, too.
Dear Serts, when Barney told me that the new dispatcher took me off night flights, I couldn't wait to thank him.
Only Serts has fresh flavor and Retsin to keep your breath face-to-face fresh. Serts and sugar-free Serts.
Tourists trapped on top of a towering inferno. For hundreds, a moment of crisis. Meet the heroes who saved them.
Watch 2020.
Tonight.
In 1975, former Secretary of State Dean Rusk said, "I'm an optimist in the long run. Americans have a way of doing at the end of the day what they won't do at noon." In the fall of 1975, what we did was to struggle inwardly and outwardly. The day isn't over, but here's some of what's been done so far.
Disco peaked in the late 70s, but not before it gave us the movie, Saturday Night Fever, and the club, Studio 54. None of the above is currently staying alive.
Saturday Night Live!
And it was a hit, and it's still on the air. Saturday Night Live, a TV maverick that became a TV tradition. The cast changed again and again. Some became stars. Others took any work they could get.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No job is too big, no fee is too big.
And one, John Belushi, died, taking some of the laughter with him.
In March of 1976, Patty Hearst was convicted of bank robbery. She served 22 months in federal prison in California, then was granted executive clemency by President Carter. She married her bodyguard, and they are the parents of 2 children. Squeaky Fromm was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for her attempt to assassinate President Ford. She's still there. Sarah Jane Moore pleaded guilty to the same charge and is also serving a life sentence.
And President Ford changed his mind about helping New York City out of its money troubles. He did it just in time for Thanksgiving and just in time for the city, which survived and more or less prospered. As did Chorus Line. It's the longest running musical on Broadway, and for a reason.
In Boston, children are now bused quietly. Integration is accepted in principle. In fact, public schools are still racially imbalanced because many whites have fled the city. In Louisville, busing has brought more racially balanced schools. Jaws begat Jaws 2, which begat Jaws 3D, and the begetting may only have begun. Jaws 87 is due for release this summer.
In 1976, Joe Frazier quit the ring. In 1981, he returned to fight Jumbo Cummings. Nobody won. In 1987, Smokin' Joe no longer fights. He runs a boxing gym. His son fights. Muhammad Ali fought many a fight before he lost his last heavyweight title match to Larry Holmes in October 1980. Now he fights a tougher opponent, maybe his toughest, Parkinson's syndrome. Disease has changed his speech, but if you ask the greatest which fight was the greatest, the answer is still the same.
I think the greatest fight was the Thrilla of Manila.
Well, there it is, the way it was in the fall of 1975. A season when many of us, as a psycho-babbler might put it, were into Eastern mysticism, est, meditation, hot tubs, disco music, anything to ease the pain of living without having to come to grips with life. New York City almost went broke that fall before it came to grips with life. It took coercion and court orders to make Boston and Louisville face up. A farmer trying to scratch a living out of the ground has no time for disco. You won't find many hot tubs in Harlem. Don't try to sell the Maharishi to a migrant worker. Real pain demands more than a sedative.
In the category of settling inner struggles, the 1975 award goes to the Hearst case for its imaginative use of the whatever works theory. Shortly after her arrest that fall, Miss Hearst was visited and jailed by her old friend, Trish Tobin. Patty, now Tanya, described herself to Miss Tobin as revolutionary and not wishing to go home. 2 days later, Tanya, now Patty, signed an affidavit swearing she was forced to become a revolutionary and she yearned to return to her family. One inner struggle solved. Then there was the inner struggle I imagine to have taken place at the New York Times in 1979 when news about Patty Hearst's wedding was fit but very tough to print with a straight face. The Times, however, managed what follows is part of its story. The maid of honor was Miss Hearst's friend, Trish Tobin. Miss Tobin's father owns the Hibernia Bank, which Miss Hearst was convicted of robbing. And so it goes.
These things also happened in the fall of 1975.
Andrei Sakharov won the Nobel Peace Prize, but was not allowed to leave the Soviet Union to accept it.
Diana Nyad swam around Manhattan Island in 7 hours and 57 minutes, breaking by nearly an hour a record that had stood for 47 years.
Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton on safari in Botswana, Africa, were married for the second time. They broke no record.
Columnist Bob Considine, bandleader Vincent Lopez, historian Arnold Toynbee, and Casey Stengel died.
Sony gave the U.S. consumer its first video cassette recorder, Betamax.
In Detroit, the first black-owned television station went on the air.
Gunsmoke went off the air.
For the Our World Study Guide, write to Community Relations, ABC, 1330 Avenue of the Americas, New York, New York, 10019.
For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.